Hello, everyone, and welcome to Africa Fire Mission's weekly virtual training session. My name is Mike. I'm a project coordinator here with Africa Fire Mission, and we're so happy you took time out of your busy schedules to come and join us for today's virtual training session. We're joined today by Ed Collet. He's been doing a lot of training for us over the years, and we're going to be talking about some easy drills that you can do in your own fire companies. Before we get started, just a few administrative items. If you stick around for at least 70% of today's training, which is usually about 40 or 45 minutes, you will receive a certificate of attendance for today's training. The name on that certificate is the name on your Zoom login, so be sure to change that to whatever you'd like to appear on your certificate. When we get completed with today's training, there'll be a tea time afterwards, where you'll be able to ask questions about today's training or anything else that may be on your mind. Keep your eyes in the chat. If you get disconnected or you don't complete all of today's class, I'll provide a link to our Google Drive where you can find today's training as well as all the other trainings that we've done previously this year. If you watch the video and answer a few questions about the training, I'll get you a certificate of attendance for that as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass things over to Ed for today's class. Take it away, sir.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's morning here, but it's afternoon there. I just got off shift, and hopefully and we did some trainings yesterday on shift, just simple things. And today we're going to talk about things we can do at the station every day, just kind of basic trainings, and also talk a little bit about training in general and how to set some of these things up. So like Mike said, if you have questions, I'll stick around for tea time afterwards and be able to discuss some of the things. But, the goal is to kind of look at opportunities we have around our stations to make training and drills. So with that, I'll share my screen here and pull up presentation. Let's see, make sure. Sharing. Oh, you have it?
We're good.
Okay, good. So if we we'll talk about drills and trainings for the fire station. So one thing to kind of look at too is everything we usually just anything we do, we call training. But there's actually, when we start digging down into things, there's a difference between training, drills, and needs assessments. Training is providing a new skill. That's something we haven't done before, something we may not be familiar with. Goes along, for example, we get a new piece of equipment on a truck. That would be, we would train on that. We don't have experience with it. A drill is where we're honing our skills and we're improving our abilities. This is something we've done, we have knowledge of. For example, pulling a hose line, something firefighters have done since they've been through recruit school. So we already have the basics down, but we drill on that evolution in order to enhance our skills and just get better at it. And then finally in all of these, both training and drills has an instructor that will say, these are our objectives. These are what we're doing for the drill or the training. And through the presentation, I probably will just call everything training, be it a training or drill, but also remember there's a difference between there. But there's direction in both of those. We know where we're going with the evolution. We know what the expectations are. We've seen what right looks like. But then there's a needs assessment often that we would do where it's kind of a free-form training where the lead doesn't give us as much tactical information about what we're doing. So, for example, he says, that house is on fire. Do your thing as an engine company. So the engine company would show up, pull lines, get water supply. And in that case, what the evaluator is doing isn't so much looking at our skills that we're executing, but he's looking for gaps in performance that they can use to build training. So we don't have as much guidance in, needs assessment evolution in order for the evaluator to get an idea of, hey, this is what we need to drill more on. This is what we need to train more on. So that's based on a scenario. Another way to look at needs assessment is just kind of set down and tabletop it, where you look at, here's where we stand with our people and the abilities of what we have, or we now have a new target hazard in our community. We need to change some of our trainings, and we need to train on this target hazard and the hazards that it's brought to our department. So those are kind of three things we want to look at training, and how we can drilling, and how we can use those on a daily basis. And when you look at training, remember, this is going to be a new skill. One of the things we kind of look at is, from an instructor standpoint, is you're going to crawl, walk, run. We don't want to say, for example, if we put a new hose load on the truck, we don't want to say, okay, full gear, air pack, everything, go. That would be how we'd normally operate in a fire. But for training, we need to do more basic. We'd start off with just gloves and a helmet, and then go slowly through everything. That'd be the crawl state. And then the next one, okay, now we're in full bunker gear, maybe put a little more speed on pulling the line, getting it in place. And then finally on the run stage, it's full geared out, just like we would on a normal fire, grab the hose, get it deployed as quick as we can. And that's what we want to do, is we want to gradually, when we're training, start and do it step by step, because if we want to go to what we view as the final product, we're going to make mistakes in the middle. And then that always demoralizes people. They don't feel good about how they've executed things. But if we do that crawl, walk, run type of ideal, where we're taking things slowly and doing it step by step and adding pieces every time, that becomes a more successful outcome. And from an instructor's standpoint, it is imperative that an instructor shows what right looks like. It is unfair to all your firefighters that are in your training if you sit back and say, okay, go do this evolution. And then when they do it, they're like, well, that's not what I meant. You didn't do it right. As an instructor, I always, especially when I do recruit classes, this is what we're going to do. I will go through and walk through the entire evolution personally, showing them the skills that I expect them to do. For example, when I teach a pump class, I don't just say, put the pump in gear, get water flowing. I will walk through and I will put the pump in gear. I will show them, these are the levers you pull. These are the buttons you push. Get out of the truck, walk over to the pump panel, show them everything as the instructor. Then you make sure, okay, did you understand everything that we're doing? They need to know what right looks like. And then once they understand it, then it's their turn to do it. And one really cool way that I found working with some really good instructors, that if you have the students in a group when you're doing individual skills, have the group that's not being taught, have them watch. So like, if say you're doing a search and you've got several groups, and you're doing it in pairs of two. So the group that you're teaching and instructing, have another group watching your instruction with that one group that you're actively engaged with, to get them kind of up and going about what you're going to expect. And then have that group run through the search. Now, that's the learning part. You've got one watching, you've got one learning. You're telling them, here's what I want, do a right-hand search, go down the wall, have good communication, split up, tell everyone what you're seeing, feel the wall, feel up high, feel low. That's your learning, and they're learning that stuff. And you have a group watching them learn. Now, what takes it to the next step is the group that you just had learning, they're now responsible for teaching the next group. and they know that ahead of time. This isn't something you spring on someone. You tell them, look, after you learn, you're going to teach the next group. And that often clicks in a little more, and they're like, okay, I really have to pay attention. Now, after I'm done, I have to go teach someone else how to do what I just did. And the instructor's always there. While that group is teaching another group, the instructor will sit back and listen to make sure they get all the points. And if they miss something, they just politely interject, yeah, that's great, but there's also a few other things we need to take into consideration when we're doing whatever type of evolution. And then by doing the watch one, learn one, teach one, it gives people 3 opportunities to reinforce that skill set we're trying to do. So it's been very successful. I've seen. I'm still learning myself how to execute that and put that into my training. After years of just doing the standard, I'm the instructor, we teach everything, kind of giving up and setting back and, having the students more involved in the whole training and drill, that they're also doing some teaching to the other groups. It also provides a level of ownership to the students to do something like that. Now, needs assessment, we talked about that a little bit. We look at how our trainings are going, prior incidents, any issues we've had on that, any changes in procedures, equipment. And sometimes it'll just be like an officer or even a firefighter saying like, hey, I think we really need to work on, this area a little more. I want to learn more about it. And I've kind of been talking to other people. They think, we're not up to speed as much as we could be for that. So that's another way to look at your needs assessment and plan out some training. But the big thing about looking at training is we're looking for progress. We're not looking for perfection in our drills. Everyone gets hung up that we have to do every evolution perfectly, and we have to do our things perfectly. But it's not so much getting things perfect as we need to just be making forward progress with how we're doing it. We do it a little better than we did it the last time. And we're looking at the progress to become better and more proficient. But probably the biggest thing is training should never, ever be punitive. I have unfortunately seen where training has been punitive and the instructor would be like, no, you messed up, you didn't do it right, and just like used it to beat people down and not bring them up and bring the group together. And when training's punitive, that's when you get people that don't want to train anymore, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to feel terrible after this training. No matter what I do, they're going to say, well, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, and that's not the way it should be. If someone doesn't meet what the expectations, that's when you say, hey, we need to work on some things. You're working to progress, but we kind of need to increase the speed at what you're progressing. So we'll look at some of those things like that. I mean, that's the big thing. Training should be about progressing a person's skill and coming together as an organization, and never should it be anything punitive. So those are things, as not even officers, but even just firefighters, when we're doing things in these trainings, we want to make sure it's always a positive environment that we set up. Centered on the firehouse, it doesn't have to be the officer that says, hey, let's go train today. It could be, just one of the firefighters. It could be a junior member. It could be a senior member. Just someone that says, hey, I am not familiar with this, or someone says, hey, let's go. We haven't done this for a while, or we haven't pulled hose for a while. We haven't looked at the extrication equipment for a while. Let's do some of these things. Just yesterday, it was one of the newer members. We were actually kind of working out a problem with some of our hoses. And I asked him, I go, hey, you got some time? Let's go work on this. And he's like, yeah, let's go. I mean, he wanted to learn. You never know. It's like the question that's never asked, that you'd be sitting around and you have a question and you're afraid to ask for some reason, but the person next to you has the same question and he's afraid to ask too. And it's everyone around has the same question. They're just kind of afraid to ask. So, it's just kind of step up and ask that question. And then that gets the ball rolling. It's like, hey, yeah, I had that question too. Why don't we go train on that? You know, and, you could do things like every month, pick a list of topics. And then from that list of topics, have every member pick one. And then they're responsible for doing the training that day. It does a lot of things when you delegate your training to some members. You always have the officer overseeing everything because ultimately he has responsibility for the company. But by letting some of the other members do the training, you're empowering them. You're letting them feel this is not just the officer's fire company. This is our fire company. We all have skin in the game to make sure we all become better and progress our skills. The other thing it does, as that member prepares for teaching, they get better at that skill themselves. Whenever you teach anything, that is the time when you're probably the best and most proficient at that skill. I have found through my career as I teach things, those are what I become really good at because you're teaching it and doing a lot of research and going, okay, I got to make this class really good for the students. I want to make sure we hit all these points. And at the end, you're like going, well, I learned something because in my research getting ready for this class, I didn't know about something, some aspect of what I was teaching. Or it's like, yeah, I guess I did learn that, but I haven't used that part of this skill for a while. So, that helps me learn and remember things as I'm getting ready to teach. So that it helps in many facets by getting the members involved and letting them do some of the trainings around the firehouse. So what are some of the topics we can look at? Some of them are really simple. Like one thing is equipment on the truck, on the apparatus. This is one thing I'll do, like when I do truck checks. As you do truck checks, have it not just whoever's driving that day checks all the trucks. Have the whole crew do it and make lists, take pictures. As you see, once you're done, say, okay, go get this piece of equipment off the truck. And then everyone on the station should be able to directly go to the right locker, open it up, and pick that piece of equipment. It teaches us equipment location, because one of the worst things I hate at any type of scene is you ask someone to go bring you a tool and all you hear is doors closing, doors open, doors closed, doors open, doors closed, because they don't know where something is and they're looking all around for it. This type of training eliminates that. Then when you get the tool or other piece of equipment, you talk about it. Okay, here's where it's at on the truck. Here's what we use it for. Here's its limitations. Here's its capabilities. And then, this all progresses to be able to better understand the equipment that we're using and where it's kept. So that's always, and it's a good simple drill. I mean, it doesn't have to be long, 15, 20 minutes. And you've learned something and people are learning something that's going to make them more proficient on the emergency scene. Hose line deployment. We're firefighters. We need to get water to the fire. It's kind of one of our bread and butter things we do. We can and it, again, this is not a long drill. Pull the apparatus out. Have however the hose is set up in the apparatus, say, okay, set a cone somewhere where you want them, or it doesn't have to be a cone, anything to mark a distance, say 20 to 50 meters away. And we need to get the branch from the engine to that marker and start flowing water. And it's simple as, this is one we did several years ago back at the symposium where we just had two groups deploying a hose line. And that's all it was. Trying a couple different hose loads, just getting proficient at how we get that hose and get water to the fire. The faster we get water on the fire, the faster the fire will go out. And like anything else, the faster we do our jobs, the more proficient we're at doing our job, the better we look for our community and the better we can protect and serve our community. And the nice thing with this type of drill, you have the firefighters pulling the hose and deploying the lines. That's one thing they're doing. But then we also get the operator involved. So on his side, he's making sure the pump's engaged, making sure there's water coming from the tank to the pump, hooking up the hose to the discharges to be able to, remember and make sure the pump's working correctly, making sure his knowledge of the pump is going well, and just everything's working well on that. So getting the operator involved in that type of drill is also beneficial. It gets the whole company working together. And again, it's just one of those things that is how we would operate on the fire ground. There'd be the firefighters deploying the line. There would be the driver operator, and then add another facet even into that, get the officer involved, where he'd be doing his 360, evaluating the scene. And it's just that whole, dress rehearsal that we would have when we show up to a fire. One of the easiest ones you can do, and we have some issues with this on the departments I've been on. Make sure you know where you're going. Today it gets to be, we get a little too reliant on GPS today. And I've actually had to discuss with our people that when you get a call and you're driving, you don't put the phone up and start looking at your GPS. As the operator, your job is to focus on driving. The officer should help you get there. But if we have, sitting around the station, nothing to do, pull up maps and maps of your area to say, okay, if we needed to go to this location, how would we get there? How would I get there at 6 a.m? How would I get there at midnight? How would I get there at 3 p.m? What are my what's a different route I could take? Time of day is going to impact the level of traffic. If I get, there are areas of my response district, if I get a call at 5 p.m, I know there's heavy traffic there, and I want to look for a different route to go to a certain call. These are some of the things we can do with map training. And again, all we need to do is, if we still have paper maps of a response district, that's a great way to do it. But another way to do it is just pull up maps in the computer, or pull it up on your phone. And then we can look at these, pick a location, find out 2 different ways to get there. What things would impact our route of travel in the apparatus? Those are types of things we want to look for. Then once we get to the scene, we want to talk about apparatus placement. We can do it if we're on a highway and we're there like for an accident or maybe a medical emergency to assist with that. How would we place our apparatus to provide a safe scene for us to work in, but still have access to tools and suppression equipment that we would need? Not only when we are on the highway working on traffic accidents do we need to think about apparatus placement. How would we do it at a fire scene? And one of the things that we need to take into consideration at a fire scene is giving us safe access to our apparatus and to our equipment, but also, have we left room for other apparatus to show up? Have we left room that if our apparatus needs to go get more water, do we have a way to get out easily and then get back in? Just kind of discuss these things about how are we going to position our apparatus? What are pluses and minuses? Unfortunately, there is no perfect solution to anything. We're going to need to be able to say, okay, if we had this type of call, here's how we place it. Here's some of the drawbacks, here's the benefits of it, and just a lot of discussion on it, and writing things down and taking notes, so when it actually time comes to place the apparatus, we can do that. And we can also take, pull the apparatus out right outside the station and maybe do some positioning work with it. Just a little drill again. Doesn't take long, spend a half hour on it. Go around, make sure everyone has a good grasp of what we're doing with it. Some of the guides to use for like when you're doing the track placement in traffic is make sure you block one lane, have it tapering over so people have enough time to get over. And this is one of those things you can train if you have a layout of how you want to set up to block traffic and you have cones or other devices to manage traffic, go out and set those up. Go set them up in the apron of the out in front of the station just to get practice of setting those traffic control devices up and how they should be properly laid out to give us that safe work zone we need to do our job safely. Because the one thing that we can't do our job effectively if we're sitting there kind of worrying about the traffic and if there's the potential for us to get hit. So we want to practice on making sure we can properly manage traffic at our scenes. If we have breathing apparatus, that's usually BA training's kind of one of those go-to drills we do at our station. Pull out the BAs, check them out, go over all the different parts, go over the tank, the frame, your gauges, your regulator, make sure that everything works. We put the mask on, put air to it, breathe a little bit to make sure everything's functional. And that's kind of like the basic drill, just understanding where all the parts of your BA are located and also what they do and how they impact your survivability. The next level to that drill, and this is one of the advanced drills that we've done in large trainings for firefighter rescue, but we also will do it at the station, is take your BA apart. Now, while you're in full sight and bare hand, this is kind of the crawl, walk, run concept. Now you can still see everything. You have full use of all your hands, your full dexterity. Your BA's apart. Now put it together. Put it together to the point that you're breathing air. Now, once you're done with that, take it apart again. Blindfold yourself. Take away, the next one is put on your gloves. Now put your BA together with that loss of dexterity that you have now from using gloves. And then finally, we actually make people be blindfolded with fire gloves on and be able to assemble their BA and then put it on and breathe air without ever being able to see everything and having the limited dexterity of using fire gloves. That will give you such an intimate knowledge of your BA when you go through that drill that if you ever have problems in a fire condition, there's no panic that sets in. Without seeing where all the parts are, what they feel like, what they should be doing, and you can evaluate your problems very easily then at that point if you do ever run into an emergency situation. That's why doing that type of training in those steps helps to build confidence and knowledge in the BA. So that, and then, that familiarization, and then just how quickly can we don and doff our BAs and do it properly. One thing that most academies do in the US is making sure everyone can go from street clothes to full gear breathing air in 2 minutes. To me, what you need to be able to do is be able to quickly put your BA on and have it properly fitting and properly functioning. Not necessarily something that you want time, because I would rather take a couple more seconds and make sure everything's on properly and functioning properly than, I was able to do this in 1 minute and 30 seconds, but I've got skin exposed, my mask isn't cinched down right, and I've got air leaks. No, I would rather take some more time, get everything on right and functional so we can do our job properly. Ladders is another one. This is actually a fun one I like to do. Just going over construction of it, the beams, the rungs. And the nice thing about going over the construction of your ladders, as you're doing this drill, you're also doing a ladder inspection. As you look at pieces saying, okay, these are the paws, these are the dogs. It's like, oh, maybe that doesn't look right. Maybe that's okay. Something's broken. We need to take care of that. So you're doing a really good ladder inspection as you're going over the construction components. And then basic like carries. How do we get the ladder off the truck? How do we carry it from point A to point B? When we get it to where we want to go, where are we going to place it? Do we place it under the window, over the window, next to the window? If we place it onto the roof, how many rungs do we have? That's usually 5 rungs above. Where do we want to place it on the roof? Making sure where we're going to put the ladder up is actually stable, and judging that to make sure we're not putting it in an unstable part of the building. And then looking at deployment, raising the ladder. Big thing, identifying targets. And I mean, identifying your hazards on the way to the targets. We want to make sure there are no trees, power lines, communication lines, anything that's an overhead hazard that could potentially snag the ladder, or actually, like in the case of electric lines, electrocute us and cause us real bodily harm if we came in contact with it. Then once we raise the ladder of the building, practice laddering, raising, and then climb the ladder. And one of the things I really like about doing ladder drills like this, not only is it teaching you a skill like ladder deployment or ladder raising, it's teaching us teamwork. And that ultimately is a fire company, what we really rely on. All of our training should be somehow organized to a level that we're always building a certain level of teamwork with it. Some of the drills we've talked about, it's not really, like maps, it's hard to build teamwork with maps. You can work on it, but looking at ladder deployment, it's definitely a team sport. Even though we teach single man ladder raises and throws, really when we're doing a lot of ladder work, we'll be doing it in teams of more than one. So we're really working on our teamwork and how to work as a team and our communication. One thing that we find in the fire service, everything we do really is keyed in on communication, be it hose line deployment, extrication, ladder raises, pump operations, command. That whole concept of good communication is a hallmark for anything to be successful. Meaning that all of our trainings, we need to really work on that communications. And when we do things as teams, like in ladder raises and ladder drills and hose line deployments, we always want to make sure we're talking about that communication key piece of it as well. Anatomy of a car, if we're doing vehicle rescue, any type of that for our department, one thing we want to be is just key in on making sure we are on the same page as far as the language. That communication concept again comes into play. Making sure everyone understand what's the B pillar, what's an A pillar, what's a C pillar, rocker panels, roof. And the easy way to do this, if there's a command vehicle, or even just kind of walk down the street, if there's cars parked out in front, say, well, this would be the A post, here's the B post, here's the C post, and then get into kind of some hypotheticals. It's like, okay, if we had to stabilize this vehicle, where would we put our stabilization? If we had to get to the patient, what would be the best way to get to the patient? just kind of going through that almost role playing ideas about if we had to do this to the car, if we had to pick up the car, if we had to raise it because someone's underneath it, where would we put our stabilization? Where would we put our lifting devices? That type of thing to go through. And then on top of that, if you have the opportunity, is looking at airbags, because those are things that, you know, can get us in a little bit of trouble if we're not aware of where they are. They can injure us, they can injure the patient once they've been deployed, if they redeploy. But just knowing locations, and this doesn't even need to be, you know, going actually and finding cars with airbags. You could just look online, see pictures of cars. It's like, okay, go to Toyota website and here's the Toyota interior for, you know, a Hilux, and then go through. It's like, okay, as we look in the interior, there's that SRS symbol here on the steering wheel, and there's the SRS symbol there up right behind the door on the B pillar. So there's airbags there. There's a tag on the seat. You know, just to get an idea, it's like, okay, if we have to go help someone and they have, you know, and they're in a vehicle that's similar to this, well, you know, how are we going to identify where the airbags are? And that's just kind of a quick training you can do at, you know, anytime at the station. And just talking about looking there, but probably one of the bigger topics that's coming out now is batteries and the lithium ion batteries. We've had, and it's not just in cars, everyone thinks the big thing is cars with lithium ion batteries. The one problem we've had in the US, lithium ion batteries being from scooters, small mobility devices like that they're actually catching fire and causing a lot of damage, a lot of harm. I think there's one city that's up to somewhere between 20 and 40 fatalities this year from fires that originated from lithium ion batteries. It's coming, no matter where you're at in the world. The lithium ion battery issue is something that will be at your front doorstep. So it's good. It's a good thing to train on in, you know, the firehouse. And there's some good references. I have two of them up here. FEMA has some good training on ion batteries, along with the Fire Science Research Institute. They actually have some good online trainings that several of them are free to take. And it's just good to get some references out there on what best ways to approach some of these fires, because it's not a question of if you're going to be involved in a fire like this. It's more of a matter of when will we start having fires based on lithium ion batteries. So that's another good one you can do in the fire station. Get someone with access so you can go online, look up some of these references, just to have a better idea of things when they come. And then you can take that training and say, how does that compare to the training we have as a department, and also our procedures and the equipment we have to address these situations when they come. Saws. You know, I like one of the well-known fire chiefs out here. He teaches about pride and ownership, and he goes, you know, for the day I'm on the truck, that is my saw. You know, it's, you take ownership of the equipment. Not that it's yours, it's still the fire department's, but you should treat it like it's your own. So like with a saw, quick training on that. Okay, how do we inspect it? We go over the blades. We look at the blade type. What can each type of blade cut? On a circular saw, you have blades for wood, you have blades for metal, you have blades for concrete, masonry. What blades on our saw? Is it the right blade for the RPMs? You have to match your blade and your RPM. What type of fuel does it take? What type of oil does it take? You know, and as you do the training with your saws, one thing that'll happen also, hopefully, is they get cleaned and they maintain more because you're taking them off the truck and looking at them because you're using it as a training, as opposed to it gets put on the truck and we check it. Yeah, it's there. It has fuel. Okay. But what we really want to do is have a good understanding of, okay, what type of blade should it have? What type of fuel should it have? How would I use it? How do I carry it? You know, those types of things get to be a really good training that we can do on every day in the station. Probably a really big one. I heard someone talking about this, and it really, as I get more into kind of a senior role and occasionally being the officer in charge for the shift for the day, the burn your city drill. Not, literally, not literally, we're not literally going to burn down our city, but what we're going to do is, walk around town or get pictures of town and sit there and say, if this building was on fire, what do we need to do? What resources do we need? What's my life hazard of the building that is on fire currently? What type of fire load does it present? What's the construction? Is it made out of lightweight timber material that will burn very quickly and pose a threat to the occupants and firefighters? Is it more of a heavy construction, more fire resistant construction? Gives us a little more time and ability to work. What's my water supply to the area? What are the exposures that I need to protect if this building's on fire? And then what's my initial attack scenario? What am I going to be doing to try to end the problem that I'm looking at? And this is, if you really want to do this and make this part of kind of your company's, training every day, you could take a picture of a building and have, a portfolio of pictures, and just every shift pull out a picture. Okay, this building's on fire. What do we do? And then have the checklist of questions. What's the life hazard? What's the fire load? Life hazard. Is it a multi-story, multi-residence where I have hundreds of people living in it? Or is it a single family dwelling that has one family? That's my life hazard. Resources. Is it in an area where I can get multiple fire brigades there to help out? Or is it going to be our company and our fire brigade only working for the first half hour to an hour? What type of fire load? Do they store tires in this? Example, do they store tires, or is it just a regular residential? Well, that's going to be, the fire load's going to determine some things of how I'm going to deal with my life hazards. Definitely my exposures and my water supply based on that fire load. And then, what are our tactics to go through this? So this one, I like this drill because it forces you to think about how you're going to tackle emergencies. And from my perspective, sometimes when I've actually been in charge, it's nice to be able to look at things and say, okay, if this happened, here's what I would do. And then if something actually happens, you have that ability just to be kind of calm about things and not going, okay, I've never seen this before. What am I going to do? I never thought about this. But instead, you're like, okay, I've seen this building. We've role played this building or a similar building. Here's my checklist I have to go through in my mind. And and you roll real incidents almost just like training. So that's the one thing that's really good about doing, the hypothetical, this building's on fire type drills. It kind of, if you end up being the one in charge, it gives you that, we'll say, element of calmness you can fall back on, because it's not something brand new to you now. It's something you can fall back on. And again, real simple. You don't even need to have a picture. Like we have a building in town and we call it the Glass Tower. It's our tallest building. It's 8 stories. If we'd sit down and say, okay, we have a fire in the glass tower, we can all sit down and talk about it and know what's around it and go through it. So sometimes you don't even need a picture, but it is also kind of helpful to have. But another easy, quick, do it around the table, sit around just talking about the buildings and what do we do if we have fires in certain buildings. There's plenty of online resources that you can do for your daily trainings. Um, Kind of vet it. I mean, a couple things you want to do whenever you're looking at online training, kind of vet it, because we've had this discussion at our fire academy that today pretty much anyone can post a video saying, oh, this is the latest, greatest way to do this tactic. Make sure the person's reputable and they have some experience in what they're teaching, you know, just because otherwise, it may not be the best thing. So kind of do some vetting of some of the online training that if you're using that and make it applicable to your department. I've watched videos and trainings that people have done from New York City, and it is not applicable. It is not directly applicable to my department, where I will get maybe 6 people on my first alarm to the fire and they're getting 60 people. So when I go through, look at something like that, I'm just picking out bits and pieces of the training I'm looking at as far as how to apply some of those parts to my department, since the overall training isn't really applicable because of my response model being so much different than the training I'm watching. So those are some things you need to watch out for on online resources, making sure, it's a vetted source, someone that actually knows what they're talking about. And, some ways to do that is like go to fire engineering website, all of their online trainings, reputable and vetted instructors, and then make sure it's applicable to your department. Tactics that work for FDNY won't work for rural America, or even, rural Kenya for that matter. And then, it's a difference between what you can do in Nairobi versus what you can do in some of the outlying counties will be very different as far as manpower and equipment. So you have to kind of vet and make applicable anything you see online to your particular situation. And kind of one thing, there's always going to be those people that set back when you say, hey, let's do some training today. They're like, yeah, I know how to do that. I've done that before, but, beginners at any skill, they'll practice till they get it right. Okay, I got it right. We're done. But the real professionals practice until they cannot get it wrong. And that's putting in the repetitions of doing something that no matter what happens, they will always be able to do it right. And that is a level of professionalism, that even though you know how to do something, you keep doing it just because you are concerned that there might be something or sometime that you could get it wrong. So you keep practicing until there is no way for you to get that skill wrong. So that's kind of what I would like to end with and leave you with. So I'll hang out, and if we have any questions for discussions, feel free to ask.
If anyone's got any questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, add a question in the chat. I would say you've done a good job, Ed. We've covered the topic thoroughly.
It's almost kind of like when you cook dinner, you know you did a good job when there is silence and everyone is just eating. Oh, wait, we have something to.
That's in Australia. Guitar's over in Australia.
Yeah, the bad thing about the lithium ion batteries is the amount of water that it requires. I mean, I've read of places doing over 30,000 gallons of water for one car. I mean, by far more than we'd use on a house fire. Then I have some friends up north that they've had some experience with it, and they were all night just, and it was in the middle of a scrapyard. They just put the car there and they just had to keep all night dousing it. Um, it's an issue. And like anything else, the fire service, we're adapting to what all the engineers and everyone have built without really consulting what we needed to be able to do it. So we're just kind of playing catch up on it. And that, I mean, that's everywhere. I guess as a fire service, we can all be, you know, we're in the same boat. No one's got an upper hand or no one's figured the problem out yet totally. So we're all learning. So we're all kind of at the same position with that.
Because of those scarce resources of water, typically a lot of our audience here doesn't have access to large volumes of water. So when you're dealing with those battery fires, you're going to be letting that fire burn out. So to tie this back around to our topic today, there's another quick and easy drill where you say, all right, we've got an electric vehicle on fire here. How are we going to deal with that? How are we going to use the limited water that we have to protect the exposures? How are we going to respond to something like that? So as Ed had said many times throughout today's training, you can use all these little scenarios, all these situations, just riding around. There's always time to squeeze some kind of training in. I think with that, we're going to wrap up the formal portion of today's training. I'd like to thank Ed for taking the time to come and train with us today. What a great topic and some great ideas about how you can continue to train every day as you're working. Thank you to everyone who used your bundles to be with us today. We appreciate you all. I'll invite you all to join us again next week. You can use the same registration link. And just a little bit of an administrative note, we do take the last 2 weeks of December off, and there will be a new registration link for 2024. And we'll be sure to provide that information through all of our social medias, WhatsApp, and things like that. So thank you, everyone, for attending today, and we'll see you all again next week.